Imagine a 6'4" receiver with Tyreek Hill speed and a 47-inch vertical. Meet Randy Moss, who is the most unguardable player of all time. With his size and speed, defensive coordinators struggle to sleep trying to game plan against him. It all began in a small town, Rand, West Virginia, on February 13, 1977, when Maxine Ross gave birth to a baby boy named Randy Gene Moss. Growing up, it was Randy and his two older siblings, raised by a single mom. She had them attend church multiple times a week. Randy's favorite player growing up was Walter Payton. Randy would attend at DuPont High School. He would lead them to back-to-back state championships in 1992 and 1993. Moss would finish his high school career with 44 touchdown receptions. Randy Moss could play practically any sport. He played basketball, and his high school teammate was future NBA star Jason Williams. He was even named a two-time West Virginia Player of the Year. He would average 30.2 points per game and 13.7 rebounds in basketball. Randy Moss would play track and baseball as well throughout high school. Randy Moss would choose to play football in college. This was after Moss was invited to the Nike All-American event. Moss said he saw guys like Kevin Garnett and said, "I can't compete with these guys." When it was time to go to college, Moss had basically every school in the country wanting him. Randy Moss would commit to play football at the University of Notre Dame. Him and his brother loved the Notre Dame Irish. They would play trivia games to see who was the biggest fan, so it made perfect sense to go there. Shortly after committing, a problem happened. Moss got into a fight after a student was being racist to him and his friend. Moss's friend would be the one beating on the student. Moss just threw a couple of kicks. Randy Moss's friend was a minor, and Moss had already turned 18. This landed Moss 30 days behind bars and his dream school taking away their offer. Moss would have to get approved to be transferred to Florida State. He would be allowed to attend Florida State. Bobby Bowden, who was the head coach, had a great reputation for taking troubled athletes and helping them turn it around. But this wouldn't work, and Randy would get into more trouble. Randy liked smoking weed, and unfortunately for him, he would end up getting drug tested. The big problem here wasn't even being allowed on the field. This violated his probation and meant that he had to spend another 60 days in jail. Randy had no choice but to go back home to play for Marshall University in West Virginia. Randy could finally show off his all-world talent at the collegiate level. He would help lead his team to a perfect 15-0 season and win a national championship. Randy Moss caught 78 receptions for 1,709 yards and 28 touchdowns. The next season, Moss would be great once again. Between both seasons, Moss had helped Marshall have an overall record of 28-3. In the 1997 season, he had 90 receptions for 1,647 yards and 25 touchdowns. To add on to it, he finished 4th in Heisman voting. Another amazing stat was Randy scored a touchdown in every single game he played at Marshall. Entering the 1998 draft, it was obvious from a talent perspective that Moss was the #1 wide receiver. He would skip the NFL Combine and do Marshall's Pro Day instead. Moss's Pro Day was ran on a cold 25-degree day. There was just a handful of NFL teams at his Pro Day. Remember, Randy's off-the-field concerns. Many teams just said, "We don't want that problem." Randy Moss reportedly ran a 4.25 40-yard dash, a team said. An insane 47-inch vertical with his height was just incredible. In the draft, Moss kept falling down the board, but he expected the Cowboys to pick him at 8. Moss was a lifelong Cowboys fan, and it made sense. Jerry Jones decided to pass on Moss. Another receiver went even before him. At last, the 21st pick of the 1998 draft, the Minnesota Vikings would select Randy Moss. The Vikings already had wide receiver Chris Carter on the team. Now they have an elite duo. Randy Moss was a 6'4" receiver with great hands and incredible speed. The league had never seen something like this. On the first day of the Vikings training camp, Vikings running back at the time, Robert Smith, already knew he was going to be a Hall of Famer. He stated that Moss is the most athletic person he's ever seen based on one practice with him. In Moss's first NFL game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he had 4 catches for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. Randy wouldn't have any other significant performances until Week 5 against divisional rival Green Bay. He would catch 5 balls for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. This next performance by Randy Moss may be his most memorable one. It was Thanksgiving night in Jerry's world, and Randy Moss remembered on draft night when the Cowboys passed on him. With just 3 catches, he would get 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. Randy really got his get back. Randy Moss would finish his rookie campaign with 69 receptions for 1,313 yards and an incredible 17 touchdowns. That is a rookie touchdown record that still stands today. Randy Moss was a first-team All-Pro wide receiver as a rookie. Of course, he would win Offensive Rookie of the Year. On the season, the Vikings went 15-1. Randy Moss helped them have the #1 offense in football that year. The offense broke the record for the most points scored in a season at the time with 556 points. In his first playoff playoff game against the Cardinals, he would have 4 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown as they would blow out the Cardinals. In the NFC Championship game, they would lose a close one to the Atlanta Falcons. Randy would continue his dominance in his second season. In the 1999 season, he had 80 receptions for 1,413 yards and 11 touchdowns. This would be good enough for a Pro Bowl appearance. In the 2000 season, Randy Moss would have another phenomenal year. He had 77 receptions for 1,437 yards and 15 touchdowns. This would give him his second All-Pro selection and his third Pro Bowl. This was an incredible start to his career. Then came the 2001 offseason, and Randy wanted a contract extension. He would sign an 8-year contract worth $75 million. In the 2001 season, Randy's stats would be down slightly. He would have 82 catches for 1,233 yards and 10 touchdowns. In 2002, he returned to the Pro Bowl with a career high in receptions, having 106. He only had 7 touchdowns though. These past 2 seasons obviously were great, but not Randy Moss great. In 2003, Moss would return to dominance. He would have 111 receptions for 1,632 yards and 17 touchdowns. That season, he averaged 102 yards per game and a touchdown per game. He would be selected as a first-team All-Pro. His most memorable game that season was against the San Francisco 49ers in Week 4. Randy had 8 catches for 172 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. In the following 2004 season, Randy would have an injury-riddled season for the first time. He would try to play through it, and you could tell he wasn't the same player. This would be the first season ever where Randy finished with less than 1,200 yards. The Vikings would make the playoffs to play the Green Bay Packers. An infamous Randy Moss play would happen in this game. Early in the fourth quarter, per usual, Randy Moss would burn his man for a touchdown. Then his touchdown celebration was to moon the crowd. This celebration got Moss fined $10,000 and possibly could be the reason for what happens next. The following season, Randy would be traded to the Oakland Raiders. The Vikings could have been done dealing with the antics of Randy Moss. Anyways, his first season with the Raiders, he would have 60 catches for 1,005 yards and 8 touchdowns. He wasn't happy about playing in Oakland. Quotes, Randy Moss would say, "Maybe because I'm unhappy, I'm not too much excited about what's going on. So my concentration and focus level tend to go down sometimes when I'm in a bad mood." His second season with the Raiders would have finished with less than 800 yards. It was clear Randy didn't care for the Raiders. It was clear he was going to be traded. Moss wanted to play for Brett Favre or Tom Brady. Bill Belichick made a call and traded just a 4th-round pick for Moss. Randy packed his bags and took a flight to New England. He could finally have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. To add on this, Tom Brady gets to throw to a guy like Randy Moss. Heading into 2007, the Patriots were favorites to win the Super Bowl, but there was a minor setback. Randy Moss had re-injured his hamstring in training camp. Media started saying things like Randy Moss isn't the same player he used to be. Even Oakland Raiders former offensive coordinator said, "Moss, a player whose skills are diminishing." Randy wanted to remind everyone of the star he is. With the structure provided by the Patriots, he was motivated to play. Randy Moss was good for Week 1 against the New York Jets. He would catch 9 balls for 183 yards and a touchdown. It was clear Randy still had the talent. The Patriots team would go to finish 16-0 on the season. They would break so many offensive records. They finished the season with 589 points, which was an NFL record at the time for the most points scored in a season. This was the second time a team featuring Randy Moss broke an offensive scoring record. Moss would finish the regular season with 98 catches for 1,493 yards and a record-breaking 23 touchdowns. That 23 touchdowns broke Jerry Rice's record for the most touchdowns in a season. This would have him return to his first-team All-Pro status and another Pro Bowl appearance. The Patriots would go on to beat the Jaguars and the Chargers in the playoffs. It was time for the moment Randy Moss had been waiting for all his life: a Super Bowl matchup versus the New York Giants. This was for the perfect 19-0 season. In this game, Randy Moss did his part, catching 6 balls for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, those 2 touchdowns by Moss were all the Patriots scored all game. This was the same team that averaged 37 points per game during the regular season. After a late game-winning drive by Eli Manning, the perfect season ended. There was always next year, right? The following season, Tom Brady would tear his ACL in Week 1. Even without Brady, Moss would have 1,008 yards and 11 touchdowns. They would just barely miss the playoffs. The following 2009 season, Brady would return. In Week 1 versus the Buffalo Bills, Moss would catch 12 balls for 141 yards. The next iconic performance came against the Titans in Week 6. Randy Moss would catch 8 receptions for 129 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 59-0 victory. Then, in a Week 10 game against rival Colts, he would have an incredible 9 catches for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. Randy Moss would finish the 2009 season with 83 receptions for 1,264 yards and 13 touchdowns. This would be the 5th time in Moss's career leading the league in receiving touchdowns. Entering the 2010 season, Randy wanted a contract extension. This is because this was the last year of his contract. In Week 2 against the Jets, Randy Moss would make an incredible one-handed catch against Darrelle Revis. The fact that Moss did this in his declining years is insane. But after only 4 games, Moss would be traded back to where it all started. The Minnesota Vikings got him back. After a loss to the New England Patriots, Moss called out the coaching staff in a press conference. He even went to the team owner and told him that the head coach was unfit to be coaching in the NFL. Randy wanted head coach Brad Childress fired. Reportedly, the owner almost listened to Moss, but instead, he cut Randy Moss. The Titans would sign Randy Moss for the remainder of the season. At the end of that bad year, Randy would announce his retirement from football, but after a season off, he would come back to play for the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners didn't need him to be the centerpiece of the offense. His last game of his football career would be in the Super Bowl. They would lose to the Baltimore Ravens. Moss would never win a ring in his career. In total, Randy would finish with 982 receptions for 15,292 yards and 156 touchdowns. He would be a 6-time Pro Bowl and 4-time All-Pro. Bill Belichick referred to Moss as the smartest wide receiver he's ever coached. Randy Moss made the NFL defense run cover 2. In a 1998 practice, Vikings offensive coordinator challenged his QBs to overthrow Randy Moss off 5-step drops. It was impossible. Balls were usually underthrown. That's how fast Randy Moss was. He was so special that a phase was created: "You got mossed." Randy Moss is by far the most talented wide receiver the league has ever seen. For more of the best football content on YouTube, subscribe and check out the video on screen.